Hey guys, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm continuing my series on how to sing like. Next up, Chris Cornell. If you don't mind, please like and subscribe to my channel. That'd be really cool. Don't forget to ring that bell so I can keep new cool videos coming your way. And I have a singing course. That course is called How to Sing Better Than Anyone Else. You can find it right here at kentamplinvocalacademy.com for any of you guys out there interested in learning how to sing or learning how to get a lot better at singing. I also have a free singing forums on my website, so there's close to 20,000 people in there now. A lot of singers in there talking about different styles of music and how to get to these great places. So I want to dive right into Chris, and I'm actually just going to play some stuff that I've sung. Now, I'm doing most all this stuff based on, actually me doing it or me and my students doing it to showcase you guys, the different techniques involved in doing this, which I cover all of this in my singing course. So we'll fire it up, we'll talk about it as we go, and let's do this.
Well, I've been watching while you've been coughing. I've been drinking life while you've been nauseous. So I drink to health while you kill yourself. And I got just one thing that I can offer. Go save yourself.
Cool. So as you can tell right out of the gate, man, Chris is full throttle Chris, and he has a lot of really great range and some killer tone. Now there's a lot of aspects about Chris's voice that I find fascinating. Let me just kind of break them down for you so I can start to get into some of the technical aspects themselves. Number one, he seemed like a singer born out of his time. Now I think he's only a year younger than me or something. I forget, I have to look it up, or was. And God rest his soul. Like I said, a big light went out, a big loss for us with that guy. So, and that is this. The first thing is that he kind of born out of time. He seemed like a singer that kind of should have been popular in the 80s because of his singing style, his range, his distortion, his power, his energy, his stamina, all those things. So to have classified him as a grunge singer, I think this is a little misleading, a little unfair, because personally I think he was more like somewhere between, a high range, maybe Paul Rogers / David Coverdale, Ian Gillan, maybe even Ray Gillan. I don't know if you guys know who Ray Gillan is from Badlands. We also lost him really early. But just a really great high belting, distorted, high range singer. And so here he was, you could almost kind of feel like he was, avoiding being tagged as an 80s metal singer. So he was okay kind of with the grunge stigma or the grunge, name, if you will. But then later he kind of got tired of the grunge name because I think he looked at a lot of the grunge bands and he didn't really associate himself with the grunge bands. So that was kind of a little, distancing that he did from them as well. I think, Lane Staley and some others that were categorized like that felt very similar. So I bring that up because it's sort of like a man without a country, but he cut his own path. And that's also really interesting. So he was sort of the quintessential example of the high range belting 80s metal singer kind of classified as a grunge singer, so to speak. I know it might sound weird, but it's kind of really how I see it. So with that said, now he compresses his sound a lot because of the grunge era, and I'm not sure if this is what influenced him to do this, but probably. Eddie Vedder sort of really coined the sound of covering your vowels. So, what we call marble mouth. And yes, we know there's been other singers in the past that have done that, a lot of pop guys. You think of I'm free falling, right? You think of different singers that have done that. But Eddie Vedder really sort of, invented that in a way that in order to kind of call yourself a modern singer, as a male especially, you had to cover your sounds like that. So, and again, like I said, I know it goes all the way back to other singers that have used it before, but he certainly drove it home and made a lot of people do it. So with that said, you have Chris covering his sounds and fitting into the grunge thing, right? And by the way, when I use Tom Petty as an example, he wasn't the only guy that did it. There were others that did it, but he for his time was one of the guys that, also marbleized that for his generation, just like Eddie Vedder did throughout, even today, people are still covering their vowel sounds. But that's a very dangerous thing to do, because as you cover the sound on the bottom, it's really hard to reopen that sound and go up. Now, I don't care if you listen to Say Hello to Heaven or, Cochise or any of the songs that Chris has done with a lot of range in it. If you listen to him go back up top, he opens up his sound in order to get to those vowels. He doesn't go, take it on me. It's take it on me. He's really open on the sound. It's the only way to get to the sound. So let me play a little more of my clip here, and then I'll talk about his distortion, his compression, and so forth. So here we go.
Take it on me. Gonna save yourself. Take it on me.
I wish I had a better track to work with. This instrumental track wasn't that great, unfortunately.
I'm not a martyr. I'm not a prophet.
Now, notice again. I'm not a martyr. I'm not a prophet. Right? It's very so just think of like singing with a lot of R's. Everything I try to do has kind of an R to it, right? R, like marble mouth. It's called rolling your R's like they do in Spanish. Right? So it's R. Everything in this context.
Now I'll preach to you, but it's a caution. You better understand that I will hold your hand. But if it helps you, man, then I won't stop it. Go save yourself.
Okay, now, as we go through this more, I want to talk about the way he compressed his air. I compress my air a lot differently than Chris did, and that's really an important distinction, because I've seen Chris on a lot of live shows, and is fantastic of a singer he is. Sometimes he was on, sometimes he wasn't as on, and there should have been a little more consistency to that. And a lot of that has to do with go on and save yourself. And compressing everything right here by squeezing the throat off to get that distortion, right? To get that sound. Now, he did take a lot of vocal lessons from a really well-known vocal coach I actually studied with also for a lot of years, who helped him quite a bit get some better open throat technique. And so you hear him going back and forth, like, he'd go out on a few shows and he'd have some good open throat technique, and then he'd kind of revert back to old habits. Now, a lot of us do this if we haven't, been consistent with our training and are willing to stay disciplined in doing that. So if we have an old habit, we have a tendency to go back to what we know worked for us. But over time, when it stops working for us, in our minds, we think, well, we're going to keep redoing this old habit because it worked for us in the past, and we think it's going to work for us in the future, and it doesn't. So we got to be really, really careful of that. But anyway, so really constant, hey, right? You want to first kind of lean into that sound with a good open throat sound first, instead of doing that. Now, a lot of people get confused by thinking that they're going to use Fry to be their savior of how they're going to understand how to get to distortion. In fact, there's a lot of Zen people out there that do this. And I've had to fix a lot of voices from that, which is a bummer, because a lot of people are hurting themselves as a direct result of that. And what it is you start with Fry, you gotta, but you know what you're going to experience? Here's a telltale to whether you know you're doing that right or not. You're going to feel a tickle in your throat. And it's going to be a tickle that kind of makes you feel like you want to cough, okay? And when that happens, that's wrong. It's wrong because what you're doing is you're agitating the cords, you're agitating the throat, and you're going to start to build inflammation. It's just the way it is. If you smack yourself on the arm or the wrist, it's going to start to swell up because you're agitating it. If you bump into something or you're hitting your knee on a countertop or an end table, it's going to swell up because you're agitating it. Inflammation will build. Well, the cords are no different. So we have to be really, really careful on this inflammation. So as you start to get this feeling, this tickle feeling or feeling like you're going to cough, you're literally agitating the throat. And that's going to cause the folds to swell up. It's going to cause your throat to swell up, possibly the trachea to swell up, like all different things. Like a lot of not good is going to result from that. So we build open throat technique first, like I cover in my course, and we start clean. Hey! hey, and then hey, yeah. Right? Now, I have a couple videos on how to sing with distortion. For you guys that are interested, I'll put those in the description. I suggest you check them out first so you can see what I'm talking about little by little leaning into a sound more and more. Now, everybody's different at their growth stages on how they're doing this, and their age plays a huge role. Their amount of diaphragmatic support plays a gigantic role. Like all these different things play a huge role. So I cover all that in my singing course as well. So I say that because I want to be really clear so you guys don't hurt yourself. But in order to obtain and get this kind of tone and this quality, it wasn't only his belting register with his distortion that made it cool. He was able to back off that percentage of distortion and use it in some of his quieter stuff, which I'm going to showcase in a minute. So anyway, let's continue.
Take it on me. Gonna save yourself. Take it on me. Down if you want.
Now, in this part, he's actually using a glut of air and then compressing the air, kind of like he would if he was to distort his voice, but instead of allowing the folds themselves to get good closure, drowned if you want, right? So he's kind of holding his breath and talking like this or singing like this. And in a second, he's going to use I'm going to, as a demonstration of Chris, use my false vocal folds combined with that sound and compressing the air to relax the chords into that kind of rattlesnake sort of sound that eventually becomes what people actually get growl and scream from ultimately, but in this case, just a lot of hyper glottal compression. So check this out.
And I'll see you in the bottom where you crawl on my skin and put the blame on me
Right here.
so you don't feel a thing.
Okay. So anyway, and then I go into, Show Me How to Live in a minute. But I'll put, again, the full length versions of these so you can check these out in the description because I want to get through some more stuff. So now when I just talked about using that tone for lower register stuff, I want you to check this out because he does this here. Not here. Hold on. I have this. You Know My Name. I'm going to get to that one in a minute. He does it here. Black Hole Sun. So check out the tone here.
In my eyes, indisposed, in disguise as no one knows, hides a face, lies a snake, and the sun in my disgrace, boiling heat, summer stench, neath the black, the sky looks dead, call my name through the cream and I'll hear you scream again.
Okay, so again, call my name. Right, so I'm like I said, I'm compressing the air at the glottis, but I start from an open throat position, and I'm also constricting or compressing air at the base of the neck and in the lung. So it's not just one thing or another. If you notice, I'm not straining. You notice I have a crystal clear speaking voice after this, and I've been doing a lot of demonstrations and singing all day. So if you're not doing this correctly, you're also going to notice you get raspy and hoarse, and kind of hardly can talk after. I don't do that because I know how to do this correctly, and I know how to rehabilitate myself and warm myself back up to a clean tone in order to keep that from happening. So let's continue.
Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Won't you come? Stuttering, cold and damp, steal the warm winds.
Now on those kind of notes, I call them bedroom voice. That is a form of fry, and then I open up into the sound. Oh, cold and damp, oh, we say I'm gonna whine at you, but it's cool, right? Basically. And so that's sort of how we get into that place as well, okay? Now, I'm gonna move on because I wanted to go ahead and show you one of my female artists doing this. This is Katie. This was of her own volition. She just wanted to do this on her own. So instead of me playing my version of Show Me How to Live, I'm gonna show you her version. She did a great job.
And with the early dawn moving right along, I couldn't buy a night full of sleep. And in the aching night under satellites, I was not received. There were stolen parts, a telephone in my heart. Someone get me a breeze to put my mind to bed. This ringing in my head, is this a cure? Or is this a disease? Now my head from my creator, you gave me life. Now show me how to live. Now my head.
Now, what's cool about this, it's kind of ironic actually, is for the most part, most of the world, I should say that if we're to look at a pie of male singers throughout the world, most of them have gone the Sam Smith route, you know, the real gentle R&B. I don't want to call it wimpy because that's not a nice thing to say, but just not a powerful kind of sound at all, just a very light R&B kind of sound. And chicks want to rock, man. I get hit up by a lot of girls. By the way, you know, these, you know, you say, well, why do you have all these girls that are coming to you and, you know, singing all these, you know, bad A kind of songs or whatever? Because chicks want to rock, man. They do. And they're the ones that are kind of stepping into the role of where the males used to be in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. So it's kind of interesting. It's pretty funny that the chicks are going, no, I don't want the wimpy crap, man. I want to rock. And the guys are going, oh, no, you know, all this, you know, very light R&B kind of stuff. So that's really fascinating to me. The other thing too is, you know, you got the Taylor Momsons and, you know, some of these other really heavy, you know, Tatiana singers that are out there doing growl. You're like, whoa, you know, you're like, yeah, you know, is she possessed? But it's kind of funny because, you know, the girls are actually tougher than the guys in a lot of ways. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a lot of guys doing some scream and growl also, but not necessarily singing. It's interesting because there's not a lot of guys out there that I'm seeing wanting to spend this kind of time and this kind of discipline to understand how to sing great like this. So anyway, gang, I'm doing most of this by request. So if you guys have a singer that you want me to do a takedown of, please put it in the description and definitely check out my next video.